Hi. Greetings to everyone from the Embassy of Cyprus in Tokyo. Today, we are more than pleased to introduce the award-winning author and playwright from Cyprus, Mrs. Constantia Soteriou. Joining her in today's discussion is Mrs. Lina Protopappa, an award-winning translator and cultural critic who has worked with Mrs. Soteriou and is familiar with her work and writing style. Mrs. Soteriou has published 3 books with one of the biggest publishing houses in Cyprus and in Greece. Her work blends reality and fiction, while at the same time it focuses on Cyprus and its history. Along with an emphasis on Cypriot women's perspective, the themes covered in Mrs. Soteriou's work include culture and nature, to name but a few. Her latest work, Bitter Country, was published in November of 2019. Death Customs, a short story that is part of the novel and which was translated into English by Lina Protopappa, was the overall winner of the 2019 Commonwealth Short Story Prize. It was the first translated entry to ever win this prize and the first Cypriot story to do so. The success of Death Customs in such a global literature competition suggests that even though it deals with a specific aspect of Cypriot history, it has at the same time a broader appeal, which resonates with a larger global audience. An excerpt of this story can be found in the original Greek, as well as translated into English and into Japanese on the site of the European Literature Festival, Windows to Europe. The story revolves around the night the protagonist, a woman named Spasula, dies. During her final moments, Spasula is accompanied by a chorus of women who narrate stories and tales, sing songs, and ease her passing by practicing the death customs that have been handed down to them by earlier generations of Cypriot women. Today's discussion will focus on the story, but we'll also cover different topics representative of the author's work. We hope that you will enjoy today's discussion while getting a taste of contemporary Cypriot literature. Finally, before we can let you enjoy the discussion, we would like to thank Mrs. Soteriou and Mrs. Protopappa for accepting our invitation, the Ministry of Education in Cyprus for their help, and of course, the European delegation in Tokyo, and especially Mrs. Takebe and everyone else involved for making this possible. Thank you very much, and let's start the discussion.
Hi, Constantia.
Hello, I am Constantia Soteriou, and this is my friend and translator Lina Protopappa. We are here this evening to discuss about nature and culture and how this subject is related to my work. Before we start, I would like to thank the Ministry of Education and Culture in Cyprus for helping with bringing everything together, the European delegation in Tokyo, the Cyprus Embassy in Tokyo, and this festival that invited us to participate in it. You know, coming from a small country and writing in a language that is not spoken widely, is very important for us to have this opportunity, this window to talk about our work as writers and to talk about how it is to write about our subjects and how it is to be a writer from a foreign country. It's always great to participate in such festivals and exchange views with others. So, Lina, the word is to you to start talking and discussing the subject.
Thank you, Constantia. I would also like to thank everyone involved in the organization of this event. And as you said, I feel the same. It's a very rare and precious opportunity that we get as Cypriots to talk about our work in a wider context. So thank you to everyone. And with this, let's get straight to our interview. Constantia, I'd like to start by asking you a rather general question. The subject of today's talk is nature and culture. I would like to ask why you chose to discuss this work of yours, which is called Death Customs in English. It's a short story that is also part of a longer work of yours, the novel Pikria Hora, or Bitter Land. And I just wanted you to speak a little about why you chose this text and what you think its relationship is to the theme of nature and culture.
Yes, I believe that death customs particularly, and in general, all my work talks about nature and culture and how they are connected. I think that this is because I write about women, simple women that are not educated. They live a simple rural life and therefore are closer to the nature and to the ancient customs. We're talking about ancient customs that they were passed from women to women and from generation to generation. I think that simple wisdom makes these women closer to nature. But at the same time, that I want to add that the women that I'm writing about, they may be simple, but they are not naive. On the contrary, they carry the wisdom of the people who are close to earth and who understand the rules of life and death. They understand what really is important. And another thing that I want to say about why I chose this particular subject story is that although maybe not be obvious to those who read the text in English, in the English translation, because as you know, it is not easily translatable. The women that I write about, they speak in the Cypriotic linguistic variety, which is another indication that they also have a more direct and simplified way to communicate between them, between culture and between nature as well.
Thank you, Constantia. Speaking about this culture, I think it's a very important part of the culture that these women are immersed in. What you refer to in your text repeatedly, and that is the rituals that these women practice, and specifically the rituals around childbirth, such as, for example, the salting the newborn baby, the rituals around the protection of a newborn baby, such as the ones that you describe by using symbols such as the bread and scissors, etc. And also the rituals around death, which also is the title of your work, so particularly important. For example, how the women help Spasula, who is dying, to let go of what pains her, to let go of her anger, to confess whatever weighs heavily on her, and to help her also pass to the other side as painlessly as possible. So I think it's very important that most of these rituals are carried out exclusively by women. And I would like you to talk a bit about how, about these rituals and about why it's important to your work that they are carried out by women specifically.
Yes, I think that those rituals are very important when you see them from any aspect. From example, these women that I'm writing about in this story, they were living during a time where doctors and medicine were not easily accessible. So those rituals and customs were the women's way to have some power over the nature. it was, as I said before, their connection to the ancient time as well, since many of these customs derive from the past. So many of these rituals actually, they have a practical and scientific explanation. For example, salting the baby, as you describe, which is a theme that it's one of the main things of the story. You know, salt it was a powerful antiseptic. It is a powerful antiseptic. So salting the baby when it was born served to kill any germs that could pose a threat over the health of the newborn baby at a time when infant mortality was extremely high, as we know. So the women try to give a name, to give an explanation to such practices in order to justify them in their eyes and in the eyes of the men. So they found a name to give to those practices which fulfill a certain purpose, and that was to safeguard the health of the newborn baby. But you know, at the same time, such practices empowered the women. They created a space where the women could be strong and could be in charge of their future and of their lives and of their babies. And this was a different kind of power compared to the power that men had at the time. And this is a very special thing, I think, since we're talking about a time that we had the patriarchy ruled in Cyprus and everywhere in the world at the time. So these rituals gave them power, and gave them a different understanding of the world. So I think this is very important as well. And a third point I want to make is that, as you said, those rituals were exclusively performed by women, and they show us that there was a certain solidarity among women. I think that in a way, not in a way, I think that it's a different meaning of feminism than what we understand today. The women of my story may not appear immediately to the contemporary readers. They may not show us the feminism as we know it, but they are very feminist because they have this solidarity among them. They have the power of women. They are strong, and they try to get to overpass the power of men and to conquer a dominant area that was not known for them, that was controlled by nature, and it was controlled by men. So these rituals, in their magical and practical form, there is a sort of strong solidarity, and it was very feminist in its core. And this was very important for me to stress. And another thing, you know, because we discussed this before, these rituals may appear to be superstitious to the contemporary reader, to us, seeing them, understanding them now. But they allow to women to have some kind of agency and control of what must have mattered most of them, which was life, if it was death, and as I said before, their way of controlling the future. And
would you like to read at this point a small excerpt of your story that has to do specifically with the salting the baby that we talked about earlier?
Yes, I think this is the time to give to the audience a taste of what we are talking about. So I'm going to read it in English, and it's going to be translated in Japanese from our translator. Mm-hmm. So this is about salting the baby. The very few times when Spatula did not talk to us about her son, She said that it was the salt's fault. She didn't talk much about it, unless it was summer, unless the heat split the stones, unless there was such terrible heat it made you want to die. It had to be that hot. Only then, in the afternoons, did Spasula sit in her yard and talk to us about her son. Come in the yard, Spasula. Come, sit with us. Tell us the story about salt, Spasula. Tell us about when your son was salted. And Spasula would tell us the story about the salt. She would tell us about when her son was salted. In the villages, when a pregnant woman went into labor, when the pain started and the time came for her to give birth, another village woman will go to the village grocer and get some salt to bring home. She had to get ungrounded, coarse, clean, unweighted salt, pay, and not utter a word at her return. Why should the grocer not weigh the salt, Spasula? Why should the woman not utter a word upon her return? Because the salt had to be grounded at home. The women had to grind it with a heavy stone on the threshold of the house, silently, without a word. The heavier the stone, the smarter the baby. They had to grind it to thin dust. The thinner the salt, the kinder the baby. They had to put the salt in water to make a thick brine. The thicker the brine, the better. And they had to give the newborn a bath in the brine. They had to bath the newborn in the brine. Then they had to dry it up and smear the salt all over it. A kind, silent woman had to get the salt and rub it all over the baby. Had to salt its legs and feet, its arm and hands, its head, its private. The kinder the woman, the kinder the baby. Oh, woe. And what did you do, Spasula? Did you not have enough salt for the baby? We did nothing. We didn't have much salt for the baby. The baby was too eager. He wanted to come to the world too early. No time to go to the grocer. No time to grind unground salt. He was born on his own in a hurry. No kind woman in the house to salt the baby. I got up all myself right after birth to salt the baby. Can the baby's mother salt the baby, Spasula? Does the baby grow well? Does the baby become good and kind when the mother salts it? Tell us, Spasula. Spasula, why did you salt the baby yourself? Oh, woe, Spasula will say. There was no other woman in sight to rub the baby with salt. I got up myself right after birth. Not much salt around the house. I used whatever I found in the jar. I put salt on his legs and feet, his arms and hands, his private. The kinder the woman, the kinder the baby. Spasula will say, and look at me from down below. I didn't have much salt for the baby. I smeared salt on his legs and feet, his arms and hands, his head, his private. I forgot his chest. You forgot the chest. I forgot the chest, Spasula will say. No salt left to smear on the baby's chest. Here, Spasula will say, and start beating her own chest with her right hand. I remember clearly the salt finished when I reached the baby's chest. You forgot the chest, I will say. Yes, Spasula will nod silently. The salt finished at the baby's chest.
Thank you so much, Constantia. This is such a fantastic passage. I got goosebumps, even though I've read it so many times.
And you translated it.
So I would like to ask another question again about these specific customs. I think it's important that your story draws certain links between different historical times and different cultures. For example, some of the rituals that you talked about and that we talked about earlier are customs that were practiced also in pre-Christian times. For example, the ones that were practiced to keep away the Galesian edges. could you talk a bit about these connections between eras and cultures that your story refers to and that it draws,
Yes.
basically?
Yes. Well, as you said, the way women understand the world and the nature and culture in my books and this story is far from Christianity, and it's connected with paganism rituals. I think that it comes from a time that people had no other choice rather than to connect with nature in order just to survive. I think this is a cycle of life that is carried forward. And again, in my stories, in my books, I want to stress that this cycle of life is mainly carried by women. You mentioned good women, the Kales Geneges, as we said in Greek, that they were a kind of trolls that harmed the babies. And I think in my book, in this story, I try to give a face to the evil that is represented by these Kales Geneges, good women. I think that the women that I describe in my books were afraid of the unknown power, and they were giving a name to this power. They again tried to find a way to fight it. I think that by fighting these Kales Geneges, good women, was an effort to embody evil, to give it a face, as I said. And again, this was a guilt of motherhood, I think, because, you know, the women felt that they had to avert death, and they had to find a mechanism deal with this. And I think that women, again, in their simplicity, they find a practical way to deal with the unexpected and to try to understand the war. Again, because you mentioned culture and conflict again, I think that the women trying to having all those rituals again and trying to understand the world, they try to find a way to understand war and conflict as well, which is a very common theme in our country. And this is a subject that I talk a lot about in my books. I think that in their mind, women, they try to say that there are rules that are above the rules of men. As Antigone said in Sophocles, these are the rules of God, of a pagan nature culture God, that stands above all the others laws of men. So the women, the way they act, the way they understand the world, it is a way to show how the conflict and how the world should be also understood.
Right. So I think at this point, I think this is the last point, more or less, we're gonna have time to make. And we've talked a bit about the culture that these women, your characters, are immersed in, and the kind of culture that they represent. But I think that it's worth discussing also a bit about what kind of culture your story in itself represents in Cyprus in this moment. So what kind of cultural intervention it has represented when it came out here. And I think the first point I think it's very important to make is that I think our story is a quite disruptive story, a quite disruptive narrative in the Cypriot contemporary context, because it's it breaks with the dominant ethno-nationalist patriarchal narratives that we've been, you know, reading about and hearing about for decades. On the one hand, you write about a subject that is it's not a rare subject, it's a very common subject in Cypriot literature, but you write about it from a very new perspective, I find. You write, first of all, women back into a history from which they had been almost completely erased, or a history in which they were written as symbols, basically, as symbols that were used by the state and that catered to basically a kind of propaganda machine rather than as full characters, and like in a very opportunistic way. And you write Turkish Cypriots back into this history. And also what you do in, I think, the most amazing way is the way you write about the intra-communal conflict. For example, Spasula San, who was one of the participants in the coup d'etat and was killed during that, and the narrator's son, they represent this conflict in a way that is very rarely discussed in contemporary Cypriot literature. And so yes, this is like the main thing that I wanted to say about how it really disrupts a very common hegemonic narrative that we've all become very used to, unfortunately, in Cyprus. And while it breaks with this specific kind of narrative, you also manage to connect with a different kind of narrative. This culture of women's solidarity that you spoke about, it creates connections with that, the customs that you described. So in a way, I think that customs is a very important intervention in Cypriot literature, because it, on the one hand, refuses to engage with this kind of like very one-sided and empty rhetoric about what identity is, about what our history is as Cypriots, while at the same time, it allows us to understand new ways to forge identities that take into account different moments of the past, and that privilege basically different values and different modes of engaging.
Yes, thank you for this comment, Lina. You know, I think that when I started writing, first of all, I want to give women a space to speak, a space to talk what they experience in the world, to give their version of the story, of the history. Because, you know, I believe that I think this is a common ground. History is not only written by the winners, it's written by men. So I think the official history that I was taught, that we are taught at schools, is written by men. And this is a certain narrative about what happened, who has the blame, what went wrong, or what we did wrong. And of course, we are always the victims, and we are always those that we have to cry over the things that happen. When I started writing, I wanted to bring women to the picture. I wanted to hear them talk about how they experienced the war. I wanted to hear them talk about how they survive everything that happened. My mother used to say that it's easy to have a war, it's easy to fight, but the difficult part is for those that are left behind, those that had to bury the deaths, and they have to make life continue, be that they have this to take the cord of life and make it happen again. And I think the women of Cyprus, all the women of Cyprus, either they are Turkish Cypriots, Greek Cypriots, Armenians, and everything else, they were this strong core that allowed life to continue. And another thing, I wanted to give a feminist perspective towards that narrative that the women will tell. And this was very important for me, not only to have women talk, but not to talk as victims, to talk as human beings, to talk as powerful persons that had a part to the conflict, and they stood up and they have their version of things to say. This was very, very important for me. And I'm very glad that it's acknowledged the way you describe it. And another thing that I wanted to stress, especially with a bitter country, it was about the mothers of the missing persons in Cyprus, who were always described as the victims, the women with the blood clothing that were at the fences waiting for the fate of their loved ones to be declared. I wanted to show that these women are strong women, that they were not by any means, they were the victim of the war in a way, but they are a victim that was not a result of anybody else. I wanted to show that these women could come above all this situation, and even in their sorrow and grief, they can survive, and they can survive because they have each other. The solidarity of women allow them to survive all this pain, all this grief, all this effort to victimize them. So this was a very important point for me to stress. And I think that another thing that I want to stress, the one that you mentioned, is that we have to give space not only to women, but to other people of Cyprus to give their version of the story. No matter how painful this story will be for our ears to hear. And I think that if I have a duty, let's say, a duty as a writer, is to give voice to those that wouldn't be heard otherwise. And I think that, somebody asked me once, why do you write? I think I write because of this, to give a voice to the people that they wouldn't be heard otherwise. And if this is the only reason that I became a writer, let it be.
And I think you do it fantastically. I've told you many, many, many times before, Constantia, but I'll say it again. And I'm very happy there's someone like you in Cyprus who writes these stories. I think we really, really, really need them. And I think you've brought such an important perspective to this history. I think, let me check the time. I think this is all the time we have. So let's close by once again thanking everyone at the Ministry of Education and Culture and everyone at the European delegation and the Cyprus Embassy in Tokyo for this amazing opportunity that they've given us to talk about your work. I'm always very, very happy to talk about it. And that's all from us, I think.
Yes, thank you all very much. Hope you enjoy our discussion. And that's all. Nature and culture and women and the magical world of writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Constantia.
Thank you, Lina. Bye.
Bye.
So this is the end of the discussion. We would like to thank again Mrs. Soteriou and Mrs. Protopappa for a great discussion and like showing us how this story has so many layers that when I first read the story I wasn't aware of. That was great. And now I would like to turn over to Mr. Partheniou from the Embassy of Greece and their author. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Agis. Good evening, everybody. So I will keep this short. Today's presentation is about highlighting an aspect of ancient Greece, which is not very often talked about. And this is the aspect of technology and technological achievements. A prime example of which is the Antikythera Mechanism, which is dubbed as the world's first computer. Mr. Stikas, our author, has been trying for a long time to make the secrets of Antikythera Mechanism accessible to the general public and to the children in particular. To this end, he has authored 2 books, one addressed to the adults, and the second addressed to children. For the time being, we hope that soon enough both books will be published in Japan. But meanwhile, we will give you a first taste, a preview tonight, which I trust you will find stimulating. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Mr. Stikas.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Constantin Stikas, and I am the author of the 2 books, as Mr. Partheniou said. I would like first to thank the European Literature Festival, as well as the Embassy of Greece, to have the opportunity today to be here and speak about Antikythera Mechanism and my books. My work is in autorlogerie, which means in the mechanical and most of them complicated watches. And I was involved with Antikythera Mechanism because a brand of important watches, they produce a modern wristwatch which includes all the indication of Antikythera Mechanism. So I will start from what is Antikythera Mechanism, because some people don't know exactly. Antikythera Mechanism is an astronomical instrument, very elaborated and not complicated, very interesting in mechanical technology that was created 2,100 years before, approximately 100 before Christ. It has a lot of interesting indications. The position of the moon and the sun, and of the 5 known at the time planets, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Saturn, and Jupiter, as well as the phases of the moon with the great precision, the full calendar of Egyptian solar calendar of the time, and also the exact day of the most important sports events of the time, and among them of Olympic Games, based on the cycles of Saros. And in parallel, he shown also the eclipses of the moon and the sun. And even if we know only 1/3 of the mechanism, because Antikythera Mechanism was found in a shipwreck in 1900. Okay, so in 1900, in April 4 of 1900, sponge divers from the island of Simi, in their journey to North African coasts, where they went to fish sponges, they discovered by coincidence a shipwreck. This shipwreck, it was in the coast of the island of Antikythera, and this is why we speak about the shipwreck of Antikythera. This was the most important treasure ever found in the sea. More than 300 really important objects, and among them more than 150 statues from bronze or marble. And for example, maybe you know the youth of Antikythera or the philosopher of Antikythera, and also a small piece of corroded bronze that was after named Antikythera Mechanism. This instrument is the first known instrument in the world which works with gears, and it totally changed the history of humanity, because just after the complete study of the Antikythera Mechanism, the people thought, and in the universities all over the world, the children were taught that the first gears of the universe, of our civilization, were made in Italy 15 centuries later, in the 14th century. Okay, so the study of Antikythera started just after the founding of the shipwreck, and but the newest technology with important X-ray scanners show us exactly what was Antikythera Mechanism. What was also interesting is that Antikythera Mechanism had two plaques from bronze, in which we have inscriptions with very small letters, 1 millimeter high, and in those inscriptions we have astronomical information known at the time, and at the same time you had a user manual, and this is very rare, an ancient instrument that has on itself a full user manual that helps a lot to understand what it was possible to do. So I started studying Antikythera Mechanism in 2014, because I prepared my first book. The name of the first book is Antikythera Mechanism, the book Researchers Unlock the Secrets of the Only Surviving Ancient Mechanical Universe. And it was, my first book was prized from the Academy of Athens in 2017, because what is important, that is all over the world, people know a lot about ancient Greek civilization, what ancient Greeks gave to the global civilization, and they a lot of time they speak only about arts and philosophy and literature, of course, with Homer, but and a lot of other authors. But what is important, that at the same time ancient Greece has given a lot in technology. It's amazing what it was possible. We had not only Antikythera Mechanism, but even robots in ancient Crete, and a lot of interesting artifacts. And in the sciences, of course, something anyone can understand. Even the fact that mathematics, physics, chemistry, mechanics, astronomy were born in Greece. So when I wrote the first book about Antikythera Mechanism, at the same time, because for me, children is my priority and what I respect more, I wrote a story for children of 8 years old, because at the time my daughter Sophia was 8 years old. So I wrote a story as I would like to tell the story to my daughter. For a long period, I don't publish this story, but now my daughter this year, she was 15 years old, and she decided to make the illustration of the book. So we started in January, and she finished in June. The book was edited in August, and is with illustrations from my daughter Sophia, made in iPad. If it's possible, to see a small video. Is a video of 5 minutes when you can have some images of the book animated, and is with music in cello, composed especially for the video, with a base of ancient Greek music. We can see the video. Okay. Okay. So this is the video of the book, and we have the plan to prepare a full film with the whole story of the book. So the story of the book is Antikythera for children. It's the name of the book is Antikythera Mechanism, the magical journey, and the story of the book is three kids, three children are meet in a Greek island. Simi is the island from where the sponge divers who discovered the Antikythera shipwreck. Is my daughter Sophia, who we have seen in the video, and after there she meet Myrto. Myrto is the granddaughter of Miss Eleni, who is one woman from the island of Simi, who helped me with the history of the sponge divers in Simi, because they had a really interesting stories. Sponge diving and sponges were so important before plastic, and you know that in Greek islands there were a lot of sponge divers, tens of thousands, and the third child is Elias, who is the ancestor from the first sponge diver who discovered by chance the shipwreck. So they have beautiful time in the Greek islands, as you maybe know how it is in the Greek islands in the summer, and they live special moments where I had the opportunity to speak about this history of Antikythera Mechanism. So in the book, you have at the same time the presentation of the importance of the Antikythera Mechanism, but also the parfum of the Greek islands holidays for children. And there are also a lot of images. There is a panoramic 4 pages representation of the starry sky, and the total eclipse of the sun, which is also in the cover of the book. All these images were made from my daughter Sophia with the collaboration of the president of the Planetarium of Athens. So they had at the same time a scientific support and reality. What is important is because, as Mr. Partheni also said in the beginning, Antikythera Mechanism is worldwide recognized as the first mechanical computer. So what is important is that the book relates the computers that all our children have in their hands every day and a lot of parents are afraid of what they can do with the dangerous sometimes computers. They are related now with the ancient Greek civilization, with the values of the ancient Greek civilization, and also with mathematics, physics, chemistry, sciences, mechanics, astronomy, and even philosophy, because Antikythera Mechanism is also related with philosophy, because it was the unknown constructor of Antikythera Mechanism wanted to share with all the people his knowledge about astronomy, and that was not very was very rare at the time, because the civilization wanted to share with others their findings, their achievements, and at the same time it was, as we say today, all-in-one instrument, because it has all the known astronomical knowledge of the time, and because of the calendars he represents also. So in the end of the book, you have a section, educational section, where is the real history of the shipwreck, what Antikythera Mechanism is able to do, a timeline with all the important dates of the Antikythera Mechanism story. And after we have 20 questions for children, and we have a recipe to make small cookies from simi, and an origami to make a little ship, and some coloring pages. Because of that, and because of the importance of the history of Antikythera Mechanism for children, we say that Antikythera Mechanism is the most important multiplier of the love of children for sciences, mathematics, physics, chemistry, and all this. And for me, it's the most important symbol of innovation. When I started writing my first book, I am a friend with the president of Christie's at the time, and he told me it's so important to help people understanding that today we are so proud that we can, with all this technology, make what 2,100 years before someone has done without paper and without a pencil. And so the book is published first in Greek and English. We are now finishing our edition in French. And for us, it's so important to have a translation and edition in the Japanese language, because I know very well the love of Japanese people for technology and for books, something that is really rare, because we have a lot in the world that love technology, but not so many who love books. And it's a rare combination. For this reason, we are also in contact with a lot of schools of ministries of education in Greece, but also in the US, in Europe, in Switzerland, because the gears found in ancient Greece that were created in ancient Greece. Aristotle was the first who spoke about gears. So the gears that were created in ancient Greece, today they are used from important brands all over the world. You have also in Japan Seiko and other brands, but also in Switzerland. So my first book is also the first important description of what have the watches of today, that is a result from Antikythera Mechanism gears and the gears of the ancient Greece. Okay. Thank you very much to be here, and if someone wants to ask something, thank you very much.
No, sorry for this. Can you hear me now? Yes, I was saying that I want to thank Mr. Stikas for his presentation, and also thank the EU for hosting this event. Thank all the colleagues, and Hiroko-san in particular for her efforts. Thank you very much.